of the things he's done, we've become like a third world nation, and it's a shame.
With the COVID, excuse me, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Well, he's right, he did beat Medicare. He beat it to death, and he's destroying Medicare.
The first U.S. presidential debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump has just concluded, marking a historic moment in American politics. The stakes have never been higher, and the world waits with bated breath to see how this will shape the future of not only America, but also its relations with regions like South Asia.
This place, the whole world is blowing up under him.
Never heard so much malarkey in my whole life.
As the dust settles on this monumental clash of ideologies, the world seeks answers to crucial questions. What are the key takeaways from this debate? How will the policies of the winning candidate impact countries like India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and beyond?
He talks about all this stuff, but he didn't do it. For 3.5 years, we're living in hell.
We're going to continue to fight to bring down inflation and give people a break.
Join us as we dive deep into the aftermath of this historic debate and unravel the implications for South Asia and beyond. Can Donald Trump be the comeback kid, or will Joe Biden rain on his parade?
Joe, our country is being destroyed as you and I sit up here and waste a lot of time on this debate. If he wins this election, our country doesn't have a chance, not even a chance, of coming out of this rut. We probably won't have a country left anymore. That's how bad it is. He is the worst in history by far.
We're the most admired country in the world. We're the United States of America. There's nothing beyond our capacity. We have the finest military in the history of the world, the finest in the history of the world. No one thinks we're weak. No one.
This is a special presentation. The first presidential debate on the road to the White House. Live, now reporting from Studio 24. Here's Mahesh Jani.
Hello. Welcome to a special coverage of the U.S. presidential election on the road to the White House. Well, if there are any bells to be rung, it rung. And the first presidential debate between 45th and the 46th. The 45th president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, took on the incumbent president, Joe Biden, the 46th president of the United States. I don't know. Did you manage to watch the entire debate? Well, if I actually put it into a summarized version of it, it was a lot of, you suck and you suck. That's it. Basically, both were trying to defend more of their administrative work during the time that they were the president of the United States of America. How did the incumbent president, because incumbency becomes a big responsibility plus a heavy burden to any president if they're defending their term, because we all know that Americans are not that happy with how their country is going on. The economy is bad, border control abysmal, and everybody wants America to get back on track the way they were prior. Now, who will deliver that? Joe Biden says it's him. Donald Trump says, no, he has already done it, he has proven it, and he's the one who will do a better job than Joe Biden. Now, if you want to know what the people of America thinks, well, the headlines are out. If you look at CNN, the ones who hosted this entire first debate, the headline reads that Biden's poor showing and Trump's repeated falsehood. Across the board, go to BBC, the same headline. Trump faltering. Go to Fox News, same headlines. A raspy Biden gets off to a halting start against Trump in the 2024 first presidential election debate. So here's a summary of the entire thing. If you did not catch it, take a look.
President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump did not shake hands when they entered the debate stage. The two candidates last met at a debate in 2020, where they also did not shake hands due to COVID-19 protocols. Biden and Trump began the debate talking about the economy. President Joe Biden has been telling voters the economy is booming and has hardly ever been doing better. But from former President Donald Trump's vantage point, the economy is crashing and is in total disarray.
That's exactly what we began to do. We created 15,000 new jobs. We brought out the position where we have 800,000 new manufacturing jobs. But there's more to be done. There's more to be done. Working class people are still in trouble.
We had the greatest economy in the history of our country. We have never done so well. Everybody was amazed by it. Other countries were copying us. We got hit with COVID. And when we did, we spent the money necessary so we wouldn't end up in a Great Depression, the likes of which we had in 1929. By the time we finished, so we did a great job.
Trump called Biden's withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan the most embarrassing day in the history of the country's life.
There was no general got fired for the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country, Afghanistan, where we left billions of dollars of equipment behind. We lost 13 beautiful soldiers, and 38 soldiers were obliterated. And by the way, we left people behind too. We left American citizens.
Biden suggested that the economy he inherited from Trump was partly responsible for the spike in inflation that occurred under his presidency.
What Mr. Trump left me. We had an economy that was in free fall. The pandemic was so badly handled. Many people were dying. All he said was, it's not that serious. Just inject a little bleach into your arm. You'll be all right. The economy collapsed. There were no jobs. Unemployment rate rose to 15%. It was terrible.
Trump followed up, saying Biden inherited almost no inflation.
He inherited almost no inflation, and it stayed that way for 14 months, and then it blew up under his leadership because they spent money like a bunch of people that didn't know what they were doing, and they don't know what they were doing. It was the worst, probably the worst administration in history. There's never been.
Biden said his administration worked very hard to get a bipartisan border agreement with Congress and called out Trump's actions on immigration during his presidency.
You're in a situation where there are 40% fewer people coming across the border illegally. That's better than when he left office. And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more border patrol and more asylum officers.
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look, we had the safest border in the history of our country. The border, all he had to do was leave it. All he had to do was leave it. He decided to open up our border, open up our country to people that are from prisons.
Well, that is a summary of exactly what happened during the debate. We will be bringing more of that coverage all throughout the day into our primetime news bulletins as well. Now, one of the things that the Democrats are feeling is that they are rattled by the performance of Joe Biden because he was not a formidable leader. He did not attack, go on the offensive or the defense. He was always on the defensive, and he was feeling a little bit rattled, as you saw in those clips where he couldn't figure out what to say, and he went to his usual line anyways. Anyway, we're going to break this down. We're going to break this down and try to get an understanding exactly how will whoever, whether it's the Joe Biden or Donald Trump becomes the next president of the United States, how will it affect this part of the world? And that's exactly what we're trying to figure out. In order to have that discussion, we will be joined by the former Foreign Minister, Dr. Sarath Amrugama, and also along with him, Attorney at Law, Udara Soisa, who is a lecturer at the International Relations at the Bandaranaike Center for International Studies. All of them will be with me right after this short break. This is a special presentation on you.
As Sri Lanka heads to the polls, stay with Other Derana 24 for up-to-date news and information from all angles, from all the candidates.
සීනි ගත්තාමත් බදු ගහනවා, බෙහෙත් ගත්තාමත් බදු ගහනවා, ඇඳුමක් ගත්තාමත් බදු ගහනවා, තැන්පත් කරන ලද මුදලට පොලියක් ගත්තාමත් බදු ගහනවා.
රට ගොඩනගන මේ මානුෂීය දෙහිව්මේ කොටස්කරුවන් බවට ඔබ පත්වන්නට සූදානම් වන්න.
ඔනෑන ආර්ථිකයක් ඇති කරලා අපේ තරුණ තරුණියන්ට හොඳ අනාගතයක් දෙන්න සැලැස්මක් මම ඉදිරිපත් කරනවා කියලා මම කියන්න කැමතියි.
From all the sectors.
සිංහ මැතිතුමා ජනාධිපතිවරණට ඉදිරිපත් වෙනවා කියන එක සමග ජන බලවේගයට මරු පහරක්.
යුද්ධයට නායකයා ඉස්සරහ යන්නේ නැහැ නේ.
කයිය ගහන කයිය නායකලටවත් අර බස් ඩ්‍රයිවිං කරන සජිත් ප්‍රේමදාසටවත් රට හදන සැලැස්මක් නෑ.
පොහොට්ටුවට දාන්න ජනාධිපතිවරණයට අපේක්ෂකෙක් නෑ කියලා. කොයි පොහොට්ටුවද නැත්තේ? බැසිල්ගේ පොහොට්ටුවටයි නැත්තේ. ජනතාවගේ පෝට්ටුවට ඉන්නවා.
මහමැතිවරණයක් දෙනවා නම් මහමැතිවරණයට සූදානම්. ජනාධිපතිවරණයක් දෙනවා නම් ඒකට සූදානම්.
News, analysis and opinions.
PF එකේ පොලිය පොදු මහජනයාට 9%යි මහ බැංකු සේවකයන්ට 29%යි.
The United States has continued to interfere in internal matters of the nation, be it overthrowing a government.
What can the SJB bring to the table that is different from what the government is offering?
මේසරේ බලන්න අපිට 69යි ඒගොල්ලොන්ට 3යි. මොකද ඔබේ ප්‍රතිචාරය?
Information you need, information you seek. Around the clock, 24/7.
මේ රට ආරක්ෂා කර ගැනීමට නැවත ඉදිරිපත් වන්නට.
ඉන්දියාවට අවශ්‍ය කරන ආකාරයට එක්කගේ විසුම සම්පාදනය කරගෙන.
මේ සක්කරයටවත් පර වෙච්චි පොට්ටු පුප්පුවක් දාන්න බෑ.
ඒවල අපි වැටුනේ නැහැ. අපි හිටියන වැඩිය හොදට නැගිටලා යනවා.
ආණ්ඩුව සටනේ ඇත්තම නැහැ. ඇඩසුත් නැහැ.
On all trusted Ada Derana platforms, Sri Lanka's story is changing again, and we are here to tell you how. Ada Derana 24, celebrating a decade of excellence.
We don't have borders anymore.
Welcome back to a special presentation on the road to the White House. The first debate between Joe Biden and the former President Donald J. Trump occurred. It is now done and dusted. We will be moving ahead with a lot of analysis. With me this afternoon is our former Foreign Minister, Dr. Saratha Mulungama. Welcome to the program. Good to see you once again. And also along with us is Attorney at Law Udara Soisa. He was a former analyst of the President Jimmy Carter Research Center in 2005 in Atlanta, United States, and also he is a current lecturer in international relations at the Bandaranaike International Center for Studies. Well, we will get into all that, but before that, I want to go to Toronto, Canada, where our special correspondent Suzanne Shenali is standing by in order to get a reaction exactly what do the American voters feel. Shenali, are you with us?
Mahesh, and it's my pleasure to be on air with you all again.
I think it's around 3 o'clock in the morning, is it?
Yep, definitely. It's not. Well, I'm doing this for you. It's not like every day asking me to do a live reporting at 3 a.m.
Well, appreciate it, Shenali, for being there in the wee hours of the morning in order to give our viewers a different take of exactly what's happening with regard to the voters of America. What are you hearing from that part of the world?
So, Mahesh, many Americans were worried that the 2024 debates would delve into the same level of chaos and interruptions that characterized the 2020 debates. So, if you can remember, Mahesh, the debate in 2020 was particularly noted for Trump and Biden's frustrated responses, though now the focus was on Biden's inability to convey his message across. So, as Stephanie Murphy, a former Democrat congresswoman, tells us there were moments where Biden did show his age. So, quote, it was difficult to understand him. So, due to the haphazard interruptions back in 2020, this time, as we all witnessed, a firm time limit was set and automatic microphone was cut off where they were all put into place. But however, to ensure, with some Democratic voters pointed out that this was taken into advantage by Trump, as Biden was unable to defend or counter some of the statements that were allegedly untrue. So over half of the Americans are closely following the news about the candidates for the 2024 presidential election. In the Democrats' camp, there was chaos and disappointment as many voters seem to lose even more faith in Biden's future and hopes of a re-election. Republican camp was holding steady, while it was not surprising performance for Trump, who was always been sharp on the game.
Exactly.
It was received positively due to his solid rebuttals. An interesting point to note is that despite it looking like Biden was given more preference for speaking, Trump is recorded to have more speaking time logged than Biden. Overall, many voters expressed dissatisfaction with both the major party candidates. According to some polls, about 49% of voters would prefer to replace both candidates on the ballot if they had the option. So younger demographics prefer the new candidates. So there we have it, Mahesh. The debates are seen as crucial for both candidates, but Biden supporters are particularly concerned about his performance, while Trump supporters are more focused on his ability to challenge Biden effectively.
Exactly. One of the things that we continuously heard was that Trump is no longer pitching his entire debate performance to voters who have not, the undecided, but he actually wanted to make sure that the base will continue to support him, and also the Republicans of Nikki Haley, would they come back? Suzanne Shanali, all the way from Toronto, Canada, early in the morning. Thank you very much. Appreciate it very much for coming on the air and sharing your views on that as well. We will be seeing more of you on World News tonight throughout up until the election in November. So, Shanali, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike.
So let's get, points of view. I really wanted to get to the fact that how would any of these presidents impact the rest of the world? One of the things that we really need to understand is what happens in America does impact the rest of the world, and we need to be mindful of that. And in order to give a taking, like I introduced earlier, Dr. Sarath Amrugama, the former foreign minister, and also attorney at law Udarasavisa is with us. Let me start off with you, Doctor. You watched the debate.
Yes.
What do you think?
I'm a bit sleepy.
What do you think?
Well, straight away one can say that the primary objective of the Biden camp, which was to show that their president was fit, was cognitively effective, and was good enough to run for another four-year term, well, that got a very big, and I would say almost a fatal hit, because exactly what they wanted to project, they've lost out on that.
Yeah.
We have to be cognizant of the fact that it was the Biden camp that asked for this
debate. Yeah, exactly. So early.
So early. Way beyond the normal electoral calendar, because the convention is far down the road.
Yeah, exactly. So usually this happens after the convention.
So they thought that this would be the breakthrough. Now, every indication shows, and our own perception, is that that was a miserable failure. Immediately after that, now CNN, which is basically pro-Biden, ran...
Even they can't defend it.
Yes, they ran a poll. And they said that the effectiveness of the two candidates was 1 to 3. For every one Biden supporter, 3 said that it was Trump who won the day. So as far as these cognitive powers, which were just developing into a big issue, everybody, even the Democrats were worried whether he could sustain this. And now they have shown that is not possible.
There was this statement that was made, and it was a rumor that was basically roaming around, which said that apparently why they kept the debate so early, Doctor, is because they wanted to see whether Biden would be a good candidate, and if not, there'll be another candidate for them to come for the convention. Is that the case? Do you believe that?
No, I don't think so, because the Biden camp was in full control of the democratic process in the early primaries.
Can there be another third-party candidate entering into the convention?
Now there are other options. One is, which was discussed by a top-level group soon after the debate. One, of course, the most obvious one would be to request Biden to step down. but there was a debate as to who has the courage to bell the cat. And they said that according to the latest Democratic Insider information, only 2 people can have a decisive influence on Biden. One is his wife Jill, and the other is his sister Valerie. Only those 2. Some people said, well, Obama might be able to do it, but no, because now for a long time, Biden has had a reputation as a cussed man. He is not going to give up very easily. So that is one question. On that, they have very badly failed. Then we can take up the other issues of the economy, then migration, then foreign affairs. Those are the main areas that they came to discuss, and particularly the question of inflation. On that also, he took a bad hit. Because
he couldn't defend.
He was on the defensive. And Trump was saying, look, inflation was very low during my time. It has gone up. And that's a bread and butter issue. He said, look at your grocery bill. You know, you're talking that you help the Hispanics, you help the blacks, you did this, that, and the other, the poorer people, the working class. But every one of them had to pay at least much, much more when they went to the grocery than I did. So inflation is also a big issue, and then for that Biden couldn't give an answer saying that we are hoping to make things better. So on the personality front, on the economy front, on the migration front, and on the foreign affairs front.
Failures all across the board.
All 4, he couldn't make a very decisive and a very comprehensive presentation which should have taken him over the top, because when they went into the debate, they were almost even. They were almost even.
Polling, exactly. Udar, if I come to you, if this, let's say it was Trump who is actually seeking re-election, and I think we saw it in 2020, he was very formidable in defending his record. In 2020, we saw when Biden came and attacked him, it was Trump who said, no, look here. And he was on the offensive, not defensive, he was on the offensive. And we see a president, I think, we've never seen like this a U.S. president. I remember since I think George Bush, the debates that occurred since then, and we never saw a president, a sitting president, this feeble. How do you assess this, Udar?
Yes. First of all, we have to understand Donald Trump is a showman. He's a actor,
he's a TV
and also TV guy. Apart from perhaps somebody like Ronald Reagan, like before him, probably Trump is the most TV-genic, media-genic person who can bring himself out to be the hero. And make the other candidate look like villain in the first place. So he had that rhetorical, eloquent support within himself. Right? Apart from that, I think, in my opinion, statistically, the current president, Biden, is struggling, as Doctor said, with considerable number of yardsticks totally standing against him. However, if you look at history of any US election, in reality, Trump's standing should be at very bottom, because he's actually a convicted felon. So not like in Sri Lanka, but as somebody who lived most of my life in US, I know that if you are a convicted felon, you cannot even get a county level job, let alone the highest job of the country. So despite Donald Trump having this dark cloud hanging over him, being a convicted felon and having several other, mind you, not civil cases only, but criminal pending cases, right, looming ahead of him, he still was able to hold himself and make himself look good. I think partly is, unfortunately, is due to, I would say, the cognitive abilities and the age of the the incumbent Biden.
But the funny thing is, Udara, both of them are in the same age category. There is not much of a difference for Biden. And I mean, I think he demised from 2020 onwards. 2020, we saw a different Biden. He was very much, on his feet. He had his entire ability to respond to questions or any kind of rhetoric that was thrown by Trump. Today we saw someone apparently, I don't know, the lights were on, but nobody was at home kind of scenario. Do you think, what I asked from doctors, I wanted to get your take on that. Do you think the Democratic Party will now be looking at another candidate, or are we basically proceeding with this?
I mean, this is, in my opinion, this is suicidal for the Democratic convention. Because if you look at polls, as Doctor said, of course, Biden was at a very, was trailing behind. But in the recent polls, you see a bit of an upsurge in polling numbers for Biden, especially, as I stated earlier, with the looming legal battles and this narcissistic tendencies you can see from Trump. However, I think with this last debate, I think this is hitting the nails at very finer parts of Biden's coffin here. Yes, so early, and this is, this is a situation of asking for it. You are asking for something so early when you're not prepared to it, and it is unfortunate that a country with so much talent, like the United States, with so many talented, skilled people, have ultimately found these two horrible candidates to run the world. What is this? This is psychotic to see this actually happening. This looks now to me like another reality TV show.
It is in a way. Doctor, I mean, let's pick on that. Two horrible candidates. What happened to America? America couldn't put on, really up and coming young. Like in 2008, we saw Obama. Obama was like a fresh of breath air at that time. From deviating from typical politics, and even in 2016 Trump was also the same. He was very different, and here we're stuck, the entire world. I mean, we can't just say America when whoever leads America, the world is basically has to follow the.
Really looks like two oddballs.
Exactly. So what do you think?
Well,
is this all what they have?
No, you see, this one thing about politics and television is that traditionally the persona of the president became very important. You remember the very famous Kennedy-Nixon debate. That's really the exemplar of this, when you talk of television and politics. That is where, for example, youthfulness, ability to talk, take on your opponent, gung-ho type. And from that, Kennedy, who was way below, after the debate was able to match up to Nixon. Nixon was the favorite. So even in classes when they teach about this is the famous incident where television can be very powerful. Since that time, every potential president has tried to create a good TV persona. Without that TV persona, it became almost impossible to become a serious political candidate. That's part of the growing up process in American politics. So for the first time, you have two people, for a variety of reasons, suddenly thrust here. And I thought it was, in a way, funny, because the moment Biden started talking about being a felon and so on, Trump came back and said, that was very funny. Your son is a felon. And not only that, very soon you'll also be a felon. So that he defused the whole situation.
No, he did that earlier also when he was talking about, I think the healthcare. Yeah. Trump was on his feet with the answers. He was basically saying, he said, we somehow, what do you call, took care of it. But then again, Trump said, I think we saw in the clips, he said, no, you drove it down to death. And that's exactly what has been happening. We're going to take a short commercial break. I'm in conversation with our former foreign minister, Dr. Sarath along with Attorney at Law Udara Soisa. With regard to the current first presidential debate of the United States, elections are happening all across the world. United Kingdom will have an election very soon. France is going to go, I think, in a couple of days. So it's a volatile period for people in power all around the world. Let's talk about our country as well. Elections per se to come. But let's take a short commercial break. More to come of this special presentation of the road to the White House. We'll be right back.
ඉංග්‍රීසි කියන්නේ අමාරු දෙයක් නෙවෙයි කියලා ඕගොල්ලෝ දැන් දන්නවා. කතා කරන්න විතරක් නෙවෙයි ව්‍යාකරණ සහිතව ලියන්නත් අපි උගන්වනවා. Let's learn the basics of English in an interesting way. එහෙනම් ඔයත් එකතු වෙන අද Derana Education English Council Phase 3 එකත් එක්ක. Catch us every weekday at 7:30 AM on Ada Derana Education.
Exclusively on Ada Derana 24. Sri Lanka's best on At Hyde Park with Indivari Amuata. Every Thursday at 7 p.m. Exclusively on Ada Derana 24.
US debates, but it usually happens after, like the doctor said earlier on, after the convention, somewhere around in September, October, and prior, the last one somewhere around in November. I'm now joined by our former Foreign Minister, Dr. Sarath and also Attorney at Law Udara Soisa. Let me come to you there. All television stations who were broadcasting this in the United States had something called fact checkers. But apparently, whatever Trump says, whatever Joe Biden says, the voters do not care about it at all. What they see is the base. And if you are talking, I think you remember in 2016, even in 2020, there was something called the swing voters. I don't think they exist anymore in this election.
The reality is almost the facts really doesn't matter at this debate. Unfortunately, for Biden, he was not able to present his facts articulately. He was not able to put a case for the American people why they should vote for him for another term. Secondly, despite certain facts going against Trump, he was able to totally avoid everything else and control the narrative in a manner and to manipulate facts in a manner that would totally flow Biden and to deflect, for example, when it's a fact that he is a convicted felon, but he was able to deflect this to the sun and for a future potential of Biden being and as said, they did not care at all to answer to any factual questions posed by moderators. So when it comes to base, they very well know that the base has somewhat made up their mind, and the majority of the Trump base, I think, is stronger and more loyal when compared to the majority of the Biden base. So even if Trump comes with a machine gun and starts shooting in the studio, I am pretty sure considerable part of his base will justify this and say, he did this for the good of the US people, and this is patriotism. This kind of, this is the rabid, polarized base that Trump is having. And unfortunately for Biden, he doesn't have it. It's matter for him. It's like...
is it the personality?
I think age, personality, and the current situation of US with the numbers. I mean, the time that I lived, the gas prices were $2. Now you cannot buy whatever that amount. So you can see that the US have now almost reaping the fruits of their own poison tree, in a way that they have manipulated the world politics in a manner that ultimately it has come back to haunt them. Their pseudo-policing attitude, and now they have the internal economic crisis, which is now solely going to be spared on Biden's shoulders, and this probably will cost him the election, these insane policies.
Doctor, you were not just a former foreign minister, but you were also a finance minister. How do you see this situation where Joe Biden keeps throwing dollars at countries like Ukraine, now in Israel, Palestine, that entire conflict? They print and then they put it back. But the price is actually being paid by Americans. That's why you see a rise of inflation in America. And we still see this when the debt is at $1 trillion, and the entire disparity is in billions of dollars. Their economy is not strong as we think it is, or is it so? And what are we not getting in this?
But before I come to that, I want to draw attention to the classical political theoretical approach that Trump used. What they say is that the biggest message, the most effective message is when you instill fear in your voter. The voter is afraid, so he has to act. Here, consistently, you can say Trump is getting back to the theme of immigration. He's saying, you open the borders, murderers have come in, rapists have come in, and the man on the street, he said, now take New York. He gave an example. The migrant, because Biden had a system of distributing these migrants. Earlier they were stuck in Texas and so on, but he sent them to different states, giving them quotas. And the quotas that came to New York, they were housed in hotels and good places, whereas there's a lot of poverty and housing problems in New York. So he said, look, these guys have been brought in. These are
and they've been housed
people.
in hotels?
Yes. Other guys are housed in hotels. So the idea of getting the voter afraid, that is the classical ploy that he used. Then, as the question you raised about the economy, Biden's foreign policy is now coming back to haunt him. Because what has happened is they have pledged and brought so much of money to be given to Ukraine, to Israel, for all their other activities abroad. Consequently, they have had to print. the fiscal deficit is widening.
Yeah.
Moment the fiscal deficit widens, then inflation sets in. And Trump asked a very important question. He said, you are pumping all this money. Invariably, it is going to affect the economy and it is going to affect the poor guy who has to pay more. Then Biden, I don't think very many people realize the implication of what he said. He said, but we are spending that money on local arms. In other words, this money is coming into America, as though that is going to justify. It is coming into America, no doubt, but all that is going to add to the inflationary tendency. So this foreign policy mistakes, which Trump said, no, in my time, we never had these wars. We never had this extra money coming into ammunition, the war industry. Even Eisenhower and all those people, Kennedy, they were very careful, even Bush, about saying that this money is not coming in a sort of artificial way into the American economy, bloating the economy by, on one hand, borrowings, large-scale borrowings, and also printing money. As the reserve currency, they can print money. So that has led to this inflationary situation.
Are we actually looking at another financial crisis in the United States? Well, because they have been talking about recession and then they are saying, some are saying that they are already in a recession. But when you're talking about billions of dollars going into other countries and, bloating the entire economy in a fictitious way, it one day might actually burst and then you will see financial crisis like 2008.
Yeah,
and the question, Doctor, I want to ask you is, if by any chance there's a high possibility Trump might win, is Trump going to inherit this crisis, and would that be a bad thing that he would not be able to have?
No, Trump's basic thing is, if we are offering services, say to NATO or to any other country, you got to pay for it.
Yeah,
he has been very tough about it, because when Trump came on the scene, Europe was having a ball. They were entrusting their defense to the Americans. Not only the American arms, the American boots on the ground, as well as American funds. So Trump came and said, no, there must at least be a fair sharing of this, the financial...
It's a fair argument.
Yeah, it's a fair argument. So that also meant that these countries had to look into their own defense establishment. Otherwise, there's so much of fat. So what has happened is this adventure, the foreign adventure, is now coming to haunt Biden. So on one side, because the young people, the universities, his normal constituency also he has alienated. Then on the other side, what he has done is he has pumped money into the economy, leading to inflation. So he's getting a double whammy.
Well, I want to ask you a different question with regard to, you're a scholar of law, and if you look at America, the entire world is looking at America as a beacon of democracy, principle, values and all that. And right now we see a situation where the voters, the people of America, when you continuously said, look, this guy is a convicted felon, but they don't care. Is he good for the presidency, the highest office in the land? Yes, he is. And you see that the rules and regulations set forth by the Constitution is no longer being respected by the people, because they think everything is designed as such to be against the people. I'm not talking about the top tier, but actually, everyday Americans. How do you analyze this? Because right now there is a clash of law, there's a clash of society. Which dominates which? Because usually we understand laws are designed to take care of the people, but then the people are now saying these laws are rigged. So in a situation like that, how do you analyze it? Because this is a really good case study.
Indeed. So for any society to progress, there has to be a balance between the social acceptance of the laws and laws itself, as you know. With people like H.L.A. Hart would say, the law is valid up until the rule of recognition. The people actually believe the law to be valid. So what you have with this rising nationalistic populism is that despite certain controls in the Constitution, people are so frustrated by almost economic marginalizations and many other issues that for them it is about themselves. In fact, it's about themselves, not about any higher set of norms. But indeed, in my opinion, I think there has historically been a good balance in the United States. But you have to understand how the US Supreme Court works. So it has been traditionally conservative, right? Yeah. And there was some balance from the 80s to 90s, and now what you can see is with these Trump appointees, Supreme Court is siding with the conservative. So ultimately, I think the court also now recognizes the pendulum is swinging to a different side, and it will be very interesting because now if you see some of the Trump's cases are stuck in Supreme Court, where the judgments are the reasoning being delayed. Yeah. So now what you can see is that ultimately there has to be some balance between whatever the constitutional reality is, because the laws cannot speak for itself. Laws are interpreted by the courts, right? So in USA, Mahesh, there is a strict separation of power. Between the three organs of the state when compared to even the Westminster system or inherited Westminster systems like Sri Lanka. There is certain mixes, right? So ultimately there has to be this balance between the social and the public expectations of legal standards. Otherwise there could be social turmoil, because despite Supreme Court consistently holding out that the last election wasn't rigged, significant percentage of the Republicans believe that the Biden rigged the election, and he made this point again in this: you rig this election, don't rig this election again.
Doctor, now you see there is let me pick on what Udara said. The nationalistic views of certain countries are like, if you take a look at France, if you take a look at Germany, if you take a look at even the United Kingdom to a certain extent, we see that there is a high possibility and a probability of these nationalistic voice taking over the helm again. In a situation like that, what are you thinking how America would be for the next 4 years? There is a high possibility, again, I'm coming back to the same thing that I've been telling for quite some time, that Trump might take the White House. And if he does, are we going to see, what is the policy decision towards the world? How would international relations under Trump would be? Because are we going to see another repeat of 2016 to 2020?
Well, the basic question is this the end of the traditional globalization process? For about 3 decades, the world was committed to a process of globalization, where capital went for the cheapest production, and centers which could provide cheap labor and also disciplined labor. It's very funny that only in the communist countries that trade unions were not allowed to interfere with foreign investment. In China, the first trade unionists who opposed foreign investors immediately sent into the lunatic asylum. They were not sent to courts. They were sent to lunatic asylum. That's one part of the Deng Xiaoping reforms. So then they were attractive havens for foreign investment. And then that globalization process took place. And of course, this led to a good standard of living in the Western world. The Western world has been living on the never-never. If you look at their own economic value of goods and services, their standard of living is way beyond what is prescribed by this reality, because they have been able to get their products cheap. For example, if an American has 3 cars or 2 cars, you can bet your boots that one is either made in Japan or in Korea. So that standard of affluence was on that globalized basis, but they had to pay a heavy price. Domestic industries were getting wound up. Now, for example, traditional Rust Belt countries like provinces like Michigan, Pennsylvania, all those were called the blue states. Democrats had to win those states. If they lost that, they've had it. That's what happened to Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
She lost what we call the blue states, the Rust Belt. Then, now, as a result of this breakdown of the internal industrial machine as regards globalization, there was a big kickback, big demand that there should be some form of local protection.
Even in those,
that is what is happening now.
The demographies of those states, like if you take Michigan, Pennsylvania, now has drastically changed. They're no longer those typical redneck white Americans. This is completely, we have a lot of people coming from Middle East, from Africa. They've taken the center stage of that entire states, and now they're deciding exactly how they should run politics.
Demographies have changed. But now, for example, Biden put heavy store on this traditional democratic machine. He was much more than Obama or somebody like that, even Clinton. Biden, after all, when you remember that Biden came into politics during the time of John Kennedy, of JFK. He reminded us. He came as the youngest senator, I think, ever, or something like that. So he's had a long innings. So he's a machine-made Democrat. And he relied on this. Now, for example, he went and joined the picket line in Ohio or someplace like that. So now that is coming apart because of this, for example, these foreign adventures, economic policies, that the Democratic coalition, there's a thing called the Democratic coalition, that is coming apart.
Indeed, we're going to take a short commercial break. You are watching our special presentation on the road to the White House, the U.S. presidential debate. The first one is done, and apparently not a good place for Joe Biden himself. We are with my panel this afternoon, Dr. Sarah Thamaguma, our former foreign minister, and also attorney at law, Udar Soisa. Let's take a short commercial break. You're watching our special presentation. We'll be right back.
දිනන සිහිනයට මග කියන සරසවිය E-Soft Metro Campus
ශ්‍රී ලාංකික සිනමාවේ ටෙලිවිෂන් සවිබලය බයිස්කෝප් අනුත්ම විශේෂාංග වැසත් සමගින් කියවන්න ටෙලිවිෂනයෙන් සිනමාව හෙට උදේ 9:30ට
එක්වන මනුසත් තෙරණ වෛද්‍ය සායනය ජුනිමස 29 වන සෙනසුරාදා උදෑසන 7 සිට අරලගංවිල විලයාය ප්‍රාථමික විද්‍යාලයේදී සමගාමී අක්ෂි සායනය ශ්‍රී ලංකා අක්ෂිදාන සංගමය සංවිධානය ජනශක්ති සුබසාධක සංගමය ජයමුතුගම අරලගංවිල පූර්ණ අනුග්‍රාහක ශක්තිය රාගම ලීසන්ස් රෝහල
වෛද්‍ය පරීක්ෂණ සහකරු
අදම ලීසන්ස් රෝහල සමග එක්වී පියවරු පිළිකා අවදානම පරාජය කරමු.
IIHS උසස් අධ්‍යාපන ආයතනය.
I think I'm in very good shape. I feel that I'm as in good a shape as I was 25, 30 years ago. Actually, I'm probably a little bit lighter, but I'm in as good a shape as I was years ago. I feel very good. I feel the same. But I was willing to take a cognitive test. And you know what? If I didn't do well, I aced him.
President Biden? You can see he is 6'5" and only 223 pounds, or 235 pounds. Well, he said 6'4", 200. Well, anyway, just take a look at what he says he is and take a look at what he is. Look, I'd be happy to have a driving contest with him. I got my handicap, which when I was vice president, down to a 6. And by the way, I told you before, I'm happy to play golf if you carry your own bag. Think you can do it?
It's a 6 handicap of all.
I was an 8 handicap. 8? I have, you know,
I've seen you swing. I know you swing.
Okay,
let's
let's
not act like children.
President Trump, we're going to...
Let's not act like children.
Well, that would be the viral quote of the day from the U.S. presidential election. Joe, let's not act like kids. That came out from Trump. Apparently, that I think there were only 2 or 3 statements. That's where we saw the typical Trump, who always keeps interrupting and who's very swift in his feet. Now, welcome back to our special presentation on the road to the White House. We're talking about the first U.S. presidential debate. With me is Dr. Sarah Tamanuguma, our former foreign minister, and also attorney at law, Budara Soisa. Doctor, I'm going to turn to you, ask you about foreign policy per se. Now, that's one of the reasons why we wanted to bring in this particular program. South Asia, Asia, there's going to be, like, we see the entire push of dominance in world power, economic powers, shifting from the west to the east, and we see China slowly rising. But then again, a person like Donald Trump would want to stop whatever is going out and keep it within America and make America strong. Now, in a situation like that, how would you analyze foreign policy of Joe Biden and another 4 years of Joe Biden or another 4 years of Donald Trump? Because we've seen both in action, and we exactly know what kind of foreign policy that they would bring to the table. Joe Biden, which we spoke about, is in fact, giving free money to everybody, but not Donald Trump. He wants more American versions of things.
Well, as far as I can imagine, Biden has become a captive of a very strong cabal when it comes to their ideas about foreign policy. Almost an interventionist type of approach, foreign policy approach, which has landed them in all sorts of predicaments. Of course, when you take a country like America, you don't have wild swings from one end to the other, because as you know that the state, what Trump called the swamp, but there is a whole structure which deals with foreign policy and so on. But what will definitely happen is that this interventionist approach will be under review. Trump has clearly said, I mean, he made some very strong statements. He said, even before I take my votes,
exactly.
As president, I will solve the Ukrainian issue. I will solve the Israeli issue. That is even before I take my oaths as the president. So his view is that America must be strong, but it must also not get involved in unnecessary wars, particularly because it entails expenditure and affects his own vision of how America must grow. So what he feels is that the potential of America, after all, it's a very, very rich country with natural resources, must be developed. And one problem, of course, was this question of fuel, of energy. And he took the stand that the shale, what was there in America, the domestic production of energy should increase, which led to a lot of problems about climate change and so on. And you can see even in the debate, there were 2 polarities, whereas Biden took a very, saying, well, why did you opt out of the climate change agreement? And Trump saying, no, well, I opted out because it was not in America's interest. So if we take our region, what will happen is that the conflict, basic conflict, economic conflict is between America and China. The others are all interim arrangements on the way. So we are in a very strategic position in this emerging conflict zones. So if there is peaceful resolution of these conflicts, that is in our interest. Otherwise, we will have...
You mean this part of the world?
Of this part of the world. Because for China, what they call the Belt and Road Initiative, which means basically securing their oil lanes and their supply lanes. Those, if there is conflict on that, if there's war on that, interdiction of that, now after all, now states of Hormuz, there's trouble. There's trouble with the Houthi rebels. So you can see it all coming along the line, as it were. So for us, we have to think seriously of a Trump administration which will not try to export this violence, you know.
Udara, if you look at the whole landscape of being Democratic and being a Republican in America, a Democrat and a Republican in America, you see there is the polarizing of ideas. It keeps actually going into various, like it's not even coming into the center, it's going further and further away. From the Democrat side, we see a lot of issues in terms of this woke ideology which is creeping in. Even the Democrats themselves are not interested in those because they think it's way too radical. You again see the same from the Republican side, where you see the nationalistic point of view coming into play. Now, in a situation like that, Trump is saying that he'll take care of America. Biden is saying, no, we are the superpowers in the world. What works for the world? What do you think? Because, I mean, we are a victim of whatever happens in America.
Ultimately.
Ultimately.
So, yes. So, let's take Democratic Party, for example, right? So, now there are effectively almost 3 segments within the Democratic Party, right? So, you have this rustic, little bit conservative Democrats, like if you see like in areas like West Virginia, right? And then you have this centrist Democrats, and then you have this very extreme liberal, like woke group. So, one of the reasons why I think the Democratic Party preferred Joe Biden over even people like Bernie Sanders, right, is the fact that, you know, these people were leaning more to the left, so they will be unable to capture this centrist and this classic Democrats from, you know, 60s, 50s, where you have you know, a little bit conservative values from the rustic states, right? So, like Doctor said, certain areas like the Rust Belt, for example, Philadelphia, Michigan, right? West Virginia, you have that area. Now, there is an inherent, almost like an existentialist crisis which is happening within the Democratic Party, because it's almost like a party that is being almost like pulled apart.
Yeah, exactly.
And the woke ideology is stronger within the party, right? And yet you also have this centrist and the classics who are actively resenting that. And ultimately what you will see is almost a degradation of this centrist and the traditional Democrats if they are not coming up to vote. Now, if you see, shockingly, Latinos, right? And
it's
blacks are the numbers among these minority groups are surprisingly high, because
I have a theory there. It is because of the simple fact that the woke culture that has come into and crept into like places like Los Angeles, in that entire area. And if you take a look at these minorities, which are Latinos, Middle Eastern, or these are family-centered cultures.
Even Latinos.
Latinos, exactly. And they don't like, you know, these kinds of creepy ideas or woke ideas coming into their family, spoiling their family. And the only place that they can look towards to secure their family, which is very much towards us, part of the world as well. We are also a family-centric society, is the Republican Party right now, and Republicans are not known for that. Do you think this is, Doctor, let me ask you, do you think this is the start of the demise of the Democratic Party, and are we going to see like a different version or a new party emerging in America?
Well, there is a very strong possibility of the Democratic Party losing its traditional veneer, you see, because new groups are coming in and playing a decisive role in the Democratic Party. Now, for example, one could never imagine an Obama in the Republican Party, you know. So, Democratic Party, the party of change, party of migrants, party of all these people. The Jews at an early stage, the Jewish community.
Now, apparently that is a hated community in America.
At one stage was a very strong, almost ideological, you know, the Harvard thinkers, Frankfurt, all that. gave a tremendous intellectual base to the Democratic Party at that time. But now it is being changed. And as both of you rightly mentioned, these migrants are very conservative. They are coming there not to again start rebellion and creating all that mayhem. They have left anyway. They have suffered from that.
Yeah.
So they are the most conservative people once they establish themselves. So definitely the party system is undergoing change there. And behind this Trump Republican change is this very solid family value. Republicans have always been solid party of family values. So, but of course, this is not the traditional family values.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to ask you now. If you take a look at the whole concept of a family in America, it has drastically changed. It's no longer that the mother, the father, the kids, and the church, the society, the village, none of that. Now it has completely gone into certain areas. But then again, there is the Central America version, the Mid-Americans. They still value this. So who do you think is the dominant party? Are we seeing the fall of a family unit?
So now take this whole issue of abortion. Okay. That is connected with the family basically, So that also came up in this debate. That was one point when you look at the demographics of the situation. Look at the urbanized, the semi-urbanized, the women and so on. That was a very strong support group for the Democratic Party. Women saying, well, we must control our own bodies. But he could not push that through, and that was his trump card. He couldn't play his trump card properly. That was one of the biggest problems. Whereas Trump very sharply defused that situation, saying, I only want the states to decide. This is not for the Roe and Wade. That is not for the Supreme Court to decide. It must go down to the states. And each state, and he also said, there are 7 states which are taking a more radical view of this than even Roe and Wade. So it's a complex situation. So the chief demographic card that the Democratic Party and Biden could play, he couldn't play in this debate, and that's going to be fatal.
Udar, for this part of the world, if you look at India is basically our big brother in South Asia. You see the relationship of Narendra Modi, the current Prime Minister, who will be there for another 5-6 years, and for him to have it's a dented relationship with the current president Joe Biden, but we saw a completely different point of view in the previous one with Donald Trump. What would be favorable for us? Do you see that if there is a Democratic Party-led presidency in America, would that benefit this part of the world? Because for us, like Sri Lanka, we are also going in for an election, but the key thing for us also is the economy. So in a situation like that, what do you think, what would be the most beneficial presidency out of the two?
Now, one thing that has unfortunately coming up among the Democrats, this is very unlikely actually, when you compared 15 years back, is this interventionist approach that they supposed to have, where they would like to kind of democratize and liberalize the world, places where need not or seek not to liberalize. So what in my opinion I feel depends on our objectives. For India, I think having Donald Trump as the partner would probably be ideal, right? And I think for Sri Lanka, in my opinion, I don't think there'll be anything that is radically affecting us to that level.
But overall, no, I mean, if you look at the whole presidency of Joe Biden, we saw that they were very much anti-Chinese, and they were bringing that rhetoric here, and we saw it impacting our political system as well. Trump, on the other hand, was not that much, especially like in places like the UNHRC. He was not effective. He didn't even give two hoots about the UNHRC, and it was beneficial for countries like us in order to showcase and proceed towards the economic growth side of things rather than getting bogged down in these unnecessary stuff. So in a situation like that, how do you see, because I honestly, there will be polarizing ideas that would be trickling down to countries like us?
Now, for example, I think Trump's policies when it comes to China, like mostly economic, right? Where the Democratic Party and the Liberals, they tend to have very idealistic views on human rights, etc. And the whole Ukraine scenario that, that is created now with almost the US and the West pushing this on to some extent on Russia, where one of these buffer states are being polarized to the West. So I think perhaps a shift in that might indicate a better relationship between US and Russia, and perhaps to some extent with China, which might trickle down to countries like Sri Lanka as well, because whenever we met recently as well, met the Russian ambassador who was saying, like the Western Democrats do not look at his face when he goes to the event. So to a point that, this kind of culture in diplomacy, in the world politics, where one ambassador goes somewhere and the other ambassadors are, scoffing him, I think might change, because ultimately Trump sees this whole thing as a business enterprise. You help me, I help you, rather than focusing on this idealistic, because you have to have these human rights and idealistic values, or you are in trouble. So I think Trump might indicate a bit of a more pragmatic approach, but knowing as somebody who lived in US and worked with the Americans, the bureaucracy in US is ultimately stronger than the president himself. I think Trump, compared to almost everybody, tried to break away from it, which I think is even difficult, because this is one man against almost an army of people, a system that is well rooted and well consolidated throughout decades, if not maybe a century.
Indeed. Doctor, we're running out of time. I'll give you the last word. What do you think, or how would all this finally be? Will we see Donald Trump returning, or would there be a surprise Joe Biden second term?
No, I doubt very much whether Biden can, in the first place, secure the Democratic nomination, and even
really,
yes, it's under consideration. And secondly, even if he gets it, it's very unlikely, I think, that he will become the next president.
Indeed. So we got to leave it at that. We're running out of time. This is a special presentation on the road to the White House. The first U.S. presidential debate. Well, that's done and dusted, like we've been saying quite some time now. And apparently, how will it go into the second one? I think the second one is somewhere around in September. That means right after the convention. So possibly it might not be Donald Trump and Joe Biden, like the doctor said. Might be a new candidate. Oh, who knows? Let's wait and see. Well, thank you very much for joining. I want to thank Dr. Sarah Thammadugama, our former foreign minister, and also attorney at law. I appreciate gentlemen for being here.
Thank you.
Well, that's all the time we have for you this afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. Please keep watching other than 24. We will keep you up to
දරුවන්ගේ සන්නිවේදන කුසලතාවයන් සොයා අපි එනවා ඔබේ පාසලට.